It certainly goes without saying that we are living right now in uncertain and very disruptive times. We're learning to work differently and we're all feeling isolated, but we're all resilient and we will power through. Today's webinar is the first in a series of complimentary webinars that IAOP will be bringing to you to help you stay informed and to stay connected. It is through the efforts of our corporate members, like Avasant, that we are able to provide this thought leadership. It's an example of members helping members, because we are all in this together. Thank you, and now please allow me to introduce our moderator, Tom Dunlap, Research Director of Avasant's Computer Economics Division. Thank you, Tom. It's all yours.
Thanks, Debbie. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining this Avasant and IAOP panel discussion around COVID-19's impact on tech spending by industry. As you said, I'm Tom Dunlap. I'm the Research Director for Avasant's Computer Economics Division. I focus on IT strategy, business metrics, the cloud, best practices, etc., and I'm the moderator. Kick it off, I would like to start by introducing our panelists, Avasant partners Anupam Govil and Robert Joslin, and Avasant Distinguished Fellow Fred Pond. Anupam, can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. This is Anupam Govil. I'm a partner with Avasant. I oversee our banking, financial services, and insurance practice, and also lead our digital transformation practice.
Robert, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, this is Robert Joslin, partner with Avasant. I oversee our energy resources practice as well as our benchmarking practice as well.
And Fred, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. My name is Fred Pond, and I am a distinguished fellow with Avasant, which means I am a retired CIO with 40 years of IT experience, business, 25 years being a CIO for 4 different companies. And now in retirement, I do this along with teaching a leadership class, and I sit on boards of 3 different companies in the Portland, Oregon area.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so how this is going to work is I'm hoping this can be pretty interactive. So I'm just going to fairly briefly go through this slide deck, and then we'll go back for questions. So at Computer Economics and Avasant, we created the Coronavirus Impact Index by industry. We all know COVID-19 fears continue to grip the world. And in addition to the human tragedy, there is also a massive impact on business. But those effects vary very much by industry. We created this Harvey Ball graphic, breaking it down. We looked at 11 industries in 4 different dimensions, and then we created a Harvey Ball for each category in each sector, and then we came up with an overall rating. If you want to see the full study, you can find it at avasant.com or computereconomics.com. The first sector we looked at is BFSI, and Anupam can talk about this more in a little bit. We found that the impact on this sector could be moderate or severe, depending on the size of the decline in stock markets and other factors. I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly and then come back. We looked at energy and resources. Robert's going to go into this. Just one point. As we all know, millions of us are now working from home. Personally, some of us are gaining weight and need a haircut. And this may have a long-term impact, on oil, gas prices, etc. We looked at the healthcare and life sciences sector. We find that the overall impact here is major, but with a mix of potentially positive and negative economic effects. High-tech, telecommunications. This sector will feel a wide range of effects on the pandemic. From the pandemic, the overall impact is mixed, but major. Anupam is going to talk more about service providers in a couple minutes and how That's going. We looked at the media and entertainment sector. We'll experience pain in some areas, but newfound demand in others. The overall impact on this sector is mixed but major. I think this one affects a lot of us. I know I'm missing baseball very much and the English Premier League. We analyzed the public sector. Governments and other public entities are struggling to cope with the pandemic and the ensuing panic. The overall impact on this sector is moderate. And obviously, it's going to be interesting to see how this massive relief package helps in the US. Next up is retail, kind of a big one. This sector is going to look completely different when this is over. Fred can expand on that. I mean, clearly the sector was already struggling before this, and it looks like this could be the final nail in the coffin for some brick and mortar stores, but of course others are thriving. Walmart, Target, Costco, just look at the run on toilet paper. Manufacturing, another very hard hit sector. We say that the impact is going to be severe and it could last a while. Fred can go on about that. I mean, just one point, once the pandemic eases, manufacturers are going to be challenged to quickly return to full capacity, and there could be both supply and demand issues. Then we looked at universities, nonprofits, and travel and transportation. We're not going to talk about these so much today, but we kind of want to do a deep dive on like 5 industries. Obviously, this travel and transportation is one of the most visible areas. We all know about the planes and the cruise ships. And then we wrap up our index study with, we talk about how to plan for a pandemic. You got to look at 3 different scenarios, low impact, intermediate, worst case scenario. And then we do our viewpoint. And the biggest takeaway here is, in the face of these dire scenarios, a robust business continuity plan that includes scenarios for surviving a pandemic is a must. Not enough enterprises include pandemic scenarios in their continuity plans, but the current situation is now compelling many to do so. I want to start with Anupam. Hey, Anupam, so can you talk about the general state of the crisis and its impact on service providers and business continuity?
Yes, thanks, Tom. Can you all hear me clearly? Okay. So as Tom has explained, COVID-19 is having a huge impact across different industries. This is a truly global crisis, which is impacting every sector and every component of every sector. In our industry, it's affecting our clients, it's affecting the service providers, it's affecting the advisors, everybody across the globe. So managing the impact of this crisis is becoming a huge challenge, as every day there's something new in terms of travel restrictions, lockdowns, and other escalation of healthcare crisis. What we're finding right now, the number one priority is for service providers to continue to operate their services, maintaining the service levels while taking care of issues around security, data privacy, compliance, service levels, and so on. And clients are expecting service providers to provide this higher level of assurance that they will continue uninterrupted while they're focusing on their own business critical needs. So in the true sense, this is a test of our industry, and we all have to collaborate, and we're seeing the heightened level of collaboration and flexibility between client organizations and service providers and advisors to make things happen during this crisis while everybody's trying to stabilize their own operations. So,
Yeah.
Tom, do you want me to comment on the banking, financial services, insurance impact?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Right. So, the banking and financial services industry obviously is going through significant turmoil because of the impact on global markets, as stock markets have plunged around the globe, credit losses are rising, consumer spending is seeing a precipitous drop, and across the board, everybody's taking a huge economic hit. The banks are facing their own logistical challenges in terms of keeping locations open and continuing services. What we're seeing is that as banks move their workers to work from home and they're unable to keep their locations open, more and more services are moving online and to digital banks and to mobile banking. And we're seeing a huge surge in that area. As far as insurance goes, the impact is also being felt significantly. On the revenue side, some life insurance companies are seeing a spike in demand, obviously as this crisis heightens fears. There's also a rise in other property and casualty insurance as people want to cover their risks. But there is a disruption in the insurance supply chain as brokers and advisors are not able to operate normally, and insurance firms are taking all measures to ensure that claims are being administered and processed in time so that their consumers don't face these challenges. So as you can see, the impact on banking, financial service, insurance is moderate, and they're taking all measures to ensure business continuity.
Thank you very much. That's excellent perspective. Robert, can you tell us what's going on with this sector, energy, utilities, resources?
Right. Thanks, Tom. So I think what we're going to see right now, and what we're seeing, is the demand to the oil supply chain is realistically going to be slowed, and I think there's going to be a couple of reasons for that. The oil-based products, as the manufacturer's been hit with a lot of the impact of the manufacturing supply chain and manufacturing facilities being shut down that actually use and increase the demand for oil consumption. As those are slowed down, that demand's going to reduce proportionately. Additionally, the demand is going to reduce because of travel. As we all know right now, since many, if not all of us, are actually working from home, we're not traveling, we're not going to the airport, we're not getting on planes, and the aviation demand is going to decrease from that. Now, the aviation demand is impact that demand, but the vehicle demand is going to decrease as well significantly, because we're no longer commuting to the offices, and the consumption for power by the offices and office facilities decreasing as well. So that's going to drive it down even more so. More and more to a home model and working from home. I think that's also going to be a little bit of a change to the future, because we're going to move a little bit towards the new normal. So some of this demand is going to decrease now and may stay down for a long term, because as people become accustomed and organizations determine that work from home models actually work for their organizations, they may actually start shifting to those models more and more over time. So we're seeing a deep spike, but I'm not sure the spike is going to completely recover. So that will definitely be a longer term impact in that demand on oil consumption. If we go over and we look at the production side of the house, the production very well may stay the same. Production capabilities may stay the same, but they may choose to reduce production or slow down production capabilities because of the downstream demand. However, there are some risks and some challenges. Just like we're seeing plant shutdowns in the manufacturing industry, we could see refineries shut down due to the COVID-19 situation, And if you look at some of the close point work proximity that people have on the production side of the house, we could actually see entire platforms shut down due to the work environment and the transportation back and forth to like offshore platforms, for example. Very well could happen. So that's going to be something that we've not heard about, but it very well could impact the production as well. If we look at the utilities, and utilities in this case sweeps up from a conversation aspect, not only electric, but gas and water. Critical operations in those plants will need to continue. We're not seeing any disruption as of yet, but the critical operations will need to continue. And if some of those facilities are hit, those organizations may need to go into a BCP mode, where they're actually isolating those crews to keep the power plants open, gas substation opens, and so on and so forth, to keep operation happening. Now, there's a side effect to this, because residential demand, probably while one, it won't be impacted due to disruption, it very well is going to be impacted due to an increased level of consumption, because we're shifting a model from everybody being at home and everybody working at home. So the power consumption to the business environment is going to shift to the home environments. Networking demand is going to shift on to the home environments as well. While this is more on the telecommunication, it's still part of the infrastructure side of the house. I think we've all felt this. Internet connectivity from your house, connection into conference lines, those are all being impacted now by an increased demand with people working virtually across the environment. So that is going to continue to have more and more of a impact the longer we stay in this model. And it's going to give the utility organizations are going to have to look at how to shift that capacity and shift that grid as well. Raw material wise, with the decrease in production and the slowdown in production, we're going to start seeing a backlog, I believe, in stockpiles of raw materials, which will be quickly tapped and drawn back down upon once we get into whatever the new norm's going to be after we flatten the curve on this and start moving back into some level of normalcy for the different environments. That's good, Tom. Back over to you.
Okay, hey Robert, before we leave you, can you tell us what's going on with the price of crude oil right now, and what the Saudis are doing, and what do you think is going to happen, like say by year's end?
Well, that's a tough one. Obviously, it's dropping with what's happening right now, and we're seeing it drop as demand decreases. Depending upon when we come out of this, is going to be kind of the challenge, because if we come out of this when we still have some level of recovery capability for at least ways here in North America for the summer months and the vacation, we'll see the normal spike up in consumption, which will draw a corresponding spike up in the price at the pump, so to speak. However, if this goes too much longer, people are already stockpiling their, if you will, cash reserves, and so we may not see that normal increase in consumption, which could have an impact on, we may not see the corresponding increase at the pump as well.
Yeah, speaking of the price of the pump, not here in California, but I know elsewhere, I think some gallons of gas are less than $2 now.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Minnesota, and that's what we're seeing right now. It's quickly approaching Minnesota, that price point, and depending upon which way it pivots over the next, the next couple of weeks, I would not be a bit surprised to see it dip below the $2 mark.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Fred, can you please tell us what's going on in retail?
Sure, happy to be here and give my perspective on this. Obviously, we're all experiencing and seeing the changes in retail. and everything from, you know, stores being completely shut down to lines to get into grocery stores and those kind of things. So we're all experiencing it today. I'll give you another touch point on toilet paper since it's such a hot topic. I have a close friend that is a senior vice president for West Coast Paper that provides paper supplies, including toilet paper, to businesses all over the West Coast. And they are now switching, and they have ample supplies, and most of their commercial customers are not buying much toilet paper because no one's at work. So they are actually now moving their supplies of toilet paper into the retail sector and working with local retailers. But even that change it's taken them over a week to make some of those changes and make it effective in getting that stuff in the supply chain. So with retailers, a lot of challenges and extremes. You're seeing grocery stores, drugstores, and other essentials, you know, very, very busy, uptick in revenues and everything, but it's going to be somewhat short-lived. It's always a hoard and react mentality when these things happen, and then it will calm down even if this does drag out more than a couple more weeks. Their demand will level off. For non-essentials, obviously the majority of them are closed. So if you're in the brick and mortar business, you're, again, depending upon where you are in the US, but clearly here on the West Coast where I am, everything is closed. And so that is an enormous impact. For e-tailers and retailers like Amazon, business is generally pretty darn good, but it is pocketed between essential products and non-essential products. So definitely consumers are holding back on spending for things that they really don't need and are more impulse buys than that. That's going down, but the core supplies are booming and doing well. The challenges across both brick and mortar if you're open or e-commerce if you're there is getting people to work and keeping them healthy. So a lot of warehouses and a lot of distribution operations in the supply chains are having challenges around getting their people to work and having them have 6 feet of separation in their work. So for instance, Columbia Sportswear, which I'm most familiar with and retired from a couple years ago, their e-commerce distribution center here in Oregon can only have half as many people working on the lines as normal because they have to keep the 6 feet of separation for those people. Long term in the retail, there's going to be supply chain and logistics challenges. But there are signs of good life. I want to kind of highlight that it's all not negative. Nike last night announced their third quarter earnings and releases, and their stock was up 10% this morning because they have survived, at least this far, quite well. And the best news from their call last night was that 80% of their Chinese retail doors are back open and seeing traffic start to return there. So obviously, depending upon where you are in the world and where this bell curve you are with this, there are parts that are good news. Now, on the downside, Nike said 100% of their North American and Europe stores are closed at this point, and they don't know when they'll reopen. So that is a big question in their outlook going forward. So I think really the theme is brick and mortar. It's going to be real tough. This is going to continue the push to online. And if you're a retailer and your online and mobile services aren't as good as what your in-store touches are, you're going to have to improve those and continue to move that way. It's going to continue to close doors and malls.
Very good, excellent. So what do you think is going to happen with delivery services, Uber Eats, Instacart, DoorDash, etc.?
Right now, they're busy. They've found good ways to leverage their models. They're hiring people like crazy. It's one of the few areas, that are really grocery stores, Amazon, and those delivery mechanisms are booming. They are going to do fine in the short term. The key is going to be how they're going to position that for long-term sustainability when people maybe start to return to whatever the new normal is going to be.
Yeah, I saw a headline on CNN yesterday that Instacart wants to hire some incredible amount of people.
100,000, I think, was what it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then of course, many stores are launching their own delivery services, Whole Foods, Safeway. I'm curious how that's all going to work.
Yeah, I think there'll be challenges in getting that smooth transition because some of them are already doing it and they're just leveraging up. Others are now trying to do it, and there's always pains in making those kind of changes and meeting customer expectations. But they're all going to do that way, and in the short term, all the people that are dislodged from work from bars and restaurants hopefully can get some of these temporary jobs that are in demand right now if they're willing to get out and be around. And I do believe, at least here in Oregon, they've categorized those delivery services as essential services, and so they are allowed to be out during the lockdown.
Yeah. Retail is, I think, one of the most fascinating sectors going on right now, like all the different little things like stores having shorter hours and also having that senior only hour in the morning. I have some friends who like that very much.
Yeah, definitely. I fit in that category. And so it is good to, even though you got to get up at 6:30 in the morning or to be in line, it's good they're doing it. And the stores here, at least, are starting to measure and keep the number of people in the stores at a more controlled level to help with the distancing.
Excellent. Very good.
This is Anupam. Sorry, I was disconnected. I'm back on. Seems like everybody's working from home and bandwidth here is at premium.
Well, welcome back.
So, Tom, I think you wanted me to cover healthcare and life sciences.
Yes. Just 1 second, Fred. Before I go back to Anupam, you said a few things about manufacturing. Do you want to talk a little bit more, like what happens when the pandemic eases?
Sure. I mean, manufacturers are really hit hard because their employees, some of them are not considered essential and can't even open their factories if they're not making essential goods, and they can't bring people to work. Other issues are that, social distancing may prevent their lines from actually functioning because they're having people too close together. So they're having to look at really tough things there. They are also facing dramatic issues around supply chain of raw materials, especially in the global environment. A good example on this is for manufacturing for Columbia Sportswear. We have a shirt called PFG, and it is made in North Vietnam, but the raw materials that go into it, the base fabric comes from Taiwan. The lining product is all cotton, and it's coming from India. The buttons are coming from China, and the stitching and some of the other accessories are coming from Indonesia. And getting that all into a factory in North Vietnam, getting the product made, and then being able to get it around the world for sales is a real challenge. So all the supply chain logistics, shipping lines are just like the airliners are putting airplanes on parking lots. Shipping lines are anchoring freighters all over the world. And when you want to start that back up, it is going to be a slow and painful process. So even when we come out of this for manufacturers, them getting their raw materials, them getting product made, and them getting it distributed around the world is going to be a real challenge. One other call out is, I think after this is all over and we look back, this will be another huge motivation for more robotics, more automation in all kinds of production and manufacturing that it hasn't been in before.
Excellent perspective. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens. It'll be a long way until we have anchors away, as they say. Yeah. Hey, Anupam, back to you. Before you talk about healthcare, there's a question for you on insurance.
Yeah, I saw that question about the liability coverage. So the reality is the financial markets are still very strong, and insurance companies, in terms of their underwriting ratios, are still very well capitalized. So we're not seeing any significant impact. What we are expecting, and we're actually seeing that happen, is insurance companies are raising premiums for future policies because the way the insurance industry works is they take your premiums, they invest it in capital markets, and as the capital markets have been depressed, they're having to raise their premiums to cover that shortfall. But we don't see any kind of a crisis in terms of the ability of insurance firms to be able to pay claims.
Very interesting. Okay, good perspective. Do you want to go on about healthcare now?
Sure. So, of course, all of you are aware, healthcare sector is right in the center of this crisis, and they're fighting this war at several different fronts. While they're seeing a surge in patients and treatment options, they're also seeing disruption and shortfall in their supply chain. One of our largest clients actually is Providence Healthcare, which actually is based out of the Washington area, and they were at the forefront of this crisis as it was unfolding. And what we've heard is that they're having to take very drastic measures to shore up the supply chain, ensure that they're getting regular supply of protective gear and medical devices and other consumables. And in many cases, they're rewiring the supply chain to ensure the supplies get to their hospitals very quickly without having to go through warehouses and other distribution centers. The other impact we're seeing with healthcare is that due to the patient load, healthcare facilities are moving a lot of general services to telehealth and remote diagnostics. And this is actually, we believe this is going to be a sort of a permanent shift, because telehealth will become the norm, at least for symptoms that are relatively less severe. And so this is helping them, offload some of the capacity and focus more on emergency services and obviously on COVID patients. Healthcare sector right now is definitely seeing a surge in demand for all types of services. And we expect this sector to have a greater need for outsourcing and third-party vendors who can support them in this critical time of need. Back to you, Tom.
Yeah, this is definitely the sector that's being one of the most highly affected. I mean, it's all over the news. What's going on in New York? Obviously they built 2 hospitals very quickly in Wuhan, China. And in New York, I think they're going to take over the huge Javits Convention Center and set up like a temporary hospital. It's definitely a lot going on with that sector. Robert, we have a question for you.
Okay, yeah, on the question was basically on the LNG market. I think it's going to track very similar to what we're seeing in the oil industry. I think while the tracking will be somewhat similar, I think the impact to supply is not going to be as bad, because one of the major impacts that we're anticipating is the impact and the reduction in demand due to the reduction in travel. That won't impact the LNG side of the house as much, but what it will do is you still have the risk for the production side and the production down. I don't anticipate as much on the impact on supply or impact on demand in that arena. But I do think the costs will continue to track somewhat correspondingly, but we just won't see the same level of reduction in demand in that area, Tom.
Got it. Do you think, speaking of the oil field, do you think some frackers are going to go out of business because of all this?
Well, the field services companies and the oil field service companies, they're whether they're going to go out of business, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be kind of tough to say. I kind of doubt it. They've gone through significant slumps before. I don't think this is going to be a downward turn and sustained turn. I mean, this is impacted. There's a twofold impact to this, right? One impact being what's occurring on the global market that's not directly related to COVID-19, but then also the impact of COVID-19 itself. I think it's going to be a hit. I think we're going to see potentially some level of slowdown, but I think it will, when things ramp back up, they're going to ramp back up to an extent that the demand will be a significant spike, and the market, it will recover. It's just going to take a bit. So those that are in a situation to ride it out in the near term will be fine. They'll be maybe battered a little bit, but for the smaller independents, they have some challenges.
Thank you. Fred, another question for you. I like what you were saying about the supply chain and the buttons being made in one place and the cotton from another place. Tell us what's going on with the Chinese market. I know something like 38% of the luxury goods are sold in China, and those are drying up fast. What's going on over there?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier with Nike, they're starting to see the recovery over in China. They are a huge amount of the luxury goods in the global fashion industry, and that's going to hit obviously not a Nike or a Columbia, but the higher end fashion people. But that business has pretty much stopped, and that high end fashion is going to be much slower to return than probably more as needed casual clothing and things. But China is starting to see the recovery from this. It's interesting how they were completely frozen, in January and February completely, and now they're starting to come out of it in late March. So possibly there's a 8 to 10 week cycle that we might see in this space of what it means to be locked down for 6 to 8 weeks and then start to come out of it. If we follow what China is, the challenge is the Chinese can lock down and the way that no one else in the world, well, except for maybe North Korea or a place like that, can. So will we be able to follow that model is still a huge question in what it is. Clearly the demand problems around Europe and North America being completely shut down now are of really more concern right now to most retailers than China, as China is starting to see things open up, people are moving around, cars are back on the roads, mass transit is functioning, and except for pockets, I think Wuhan is still fairly closed down, although car traffic is now allowed there. But they have definitely come out of this thing, whereas other parts of the world are either in the midst, deeply in it, or in America here, we have mixed mode of complete shutdowns to, in some states, to minor in other states.
Thank you. It'd definitely be interesting to see what happens. Hey, Anupam, back to you. Did you see that question about technical support volumes?
Yeah, so I think, with B2B technical support, again, depending on the industry, there is definitely a higher volume we're seeing, and that's going to continue to grow. So retail sector, healthcare, manufacturing, transportation. Transportation is another sector actually which is seeing a huge surge. and by transportation we mean rail and trucking and shipping, they haven't really been disrupted while air travel has been disrupted. So B2B technical support is definitely seeing a surge because many of the companies that may have had internal teams are not able to staff it adequately, and they're depending more and more on third-party service providers. So we expect that that segment of the services market to grow.
Very good. We have 2 more questions for you on Teams. Did you see those?
Sorry, I'm having online challenges. Can you repeat them?
Sure. Regarding healthcare, you mentioned a shift to outsourcing. Can you comment on the need for customers care/service outsourcing? How do you see it shaping in the next 6 months?
So what we're seeing right now, of course, is increased support in terms of patient onboarding services and claims and revenue cycle management services. But we think as this crisis evolves and maybe reaches stability or starts declining in terms of pandemic cases, we're going to see a greater demand for some of the areas where hospitals really need to shore up their operations, which is primary one being supply chain optimization. That has been an area that was very much in under capacity and was sort of overloaded by the demand on the systems. So we're going to see that, and we're also going to see a renewed trust in terms of infrastructure and application modernization. One of the things that's coming out of this crisis is this is going to be an accelerator for digital transformation. Companies that were already digital in terms of having their data on the cloud, having mobility solutions for their workforce and applications on the cloud and so on, they're going to fare better because they don't need to manage on-premise systems and applications. So hospitals have been, and healthcare sector in general has been behind the curve in terms of IT and apps modernization. So we're going to see a renewed demand in terms of moving to the cloud and other digital transformation services, including automation, business process optimization, and so on.
Yeah, definitely more digital transformation coming. That leads into another question for you. Most sectors outsource their non-core work to third-party vendors. These outsourcing companies rely on call centers with a lot of manpower. Due to lockdown, agents can't come to work, and it is very difficult to make them waha. Any thoughts on business process outsourcing?
Yeah, so it's a bit too early to say what the long-term impact will be. However, contact centers especially are a bit at a disadvantage in terms of working from home because many of the contact centers have built their business model around having large locations with thousands of agents working on very secure infrastructure, including telecom connectivity and servers and equipment. And also they have their processes geared around how 10, 12 people are supervised and how the workforce is managed. So working remotely from home is a difficult proposition for contact centers that haven't already used that. Now, there are very mature remote work technology solutions available, cloud-based contact center solutions available that do enable it. But our sense is the contact centers that are focused on already doing some work from home, they may be able to transition smoothly, versus others that haven't, they will face challenges. Now, we are going to definitely see more outsourcing of back office functions. However, we believe that maybe the core functions, core to business, may actually see a negative effect because of the higher risk profile. and clients will probably want to keep more of their core functions in-house while outsourcing more non-core services.
Anupam, it's Robert. I agree completely, and I think that's going to be with the conversations I'm having, at least, because in the industry sectors that I deal with, there's a lot of call center processing. One of the things that we're seeing too, and that I anticipate will also happen in this area, is clients going to need to think about diversifying, because the COVID-19 is not exclusively a outsource or in-source problem. So organizations that have completely 100% in-source their call center, they don't have the ability to diversify, in a lot of cases, that delivery model across different geographical locations. So if they move to standardized call processing, they can actually spread their load across multiple centers. So some of the service providers that have large call center delivery services capabilities in multiple different geographies, I think we're also going to see, instead of having monolithic solutions for clients in many cases, we're going to see some clients move to a highly distributed model to minimize this impact in the future, and a hybrid model of both insourced and outsourced models too as well, to leverage the geographical delivery model and to minimize their risk. I think that may be one of the other trends that we're going to see coming out for risk mitigation.
Very good. We have another question on outsourcing to whoever wants it. If someone were to start an outsourcing business right now, what domain or service offering would be better to start with?
Okay, this is Anupam. I can take that first, and maybe Robert or Fred, if you want to add. So as I mentioned, we are definitely seeing a surge in a need for digital transformation, various digital technologies, and starting with cloud. Cloud, although has been around for a number of years, cloud has become what we call a prerequisite for digital transformation. So if you're not already on the cloud, you're really hampered in terms of being able to go through that transformation. So moving to an agile IT infrastructure, moving to the cloud is an essential. But on top of that, we're going to see more focus on automation, as workforce now has been disrupted. And I think the more automation you bring into it, the more you can de-link, workforce from these kinds of disruptions. We're also going to see a huge demand for analytics and AI, and that is going to only increase in the coming months. So if you're to start a business, an outsourcing business right now, our recommendation would be to look at areas of existing operations and IT that can be transformed through these digital technologies, and creating a business model around that enablement. So that's where we think there's going to be tremendous growth.
Very good. I've got another question for whoever wants it. What are the top 5 parameters that business globally, especially automotive customers, can expect from IT service providers during this crisis? For example, Detroit has taken a hit.
Robert, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'm still, I'm not exactly sure what the intent is on the top 5 parameters that they're looking at here from a question, but I think the big thing right now is if you think about the automotive customers and just the general impact that's going to occur to the automotive industry, there's going to be multiple aspects. One, supplies obviously going down. With people getting out, people going into to look at buying vehicles, transportation. They're looking more toward core needs and core life requirements. Although we do see home sales moving up, and home sales are staying steady right now. But so there's going to be less people looking at that. I think the supply chains are going to see some significant disruptions. So when it does pick back up, I think one of the parameters we'll see is a demand reduction for a lot of the motor vehicles. With the fuel prices being down, I think people that are buying may actually opt a little bit more to go towards some of the less efficient vehicles too as well. I hadn't really thought too much about the automotive side. That's not a sector I deal with that much. But Anupam, any of your quick thoughts?
Yeah, I think to me, some of the things that IT service providers are going to be expected to do as a basic minimum coming out of this crisis is going to be very, very strong business continuity and risk mitigation measures. Also, this crisis has highlighted the importance of having a truly global delivery model. So, for example, the larger service providers that have locations around the world have been able to weather this crisis for their clients better by moving work around different countries. This crisis has actually expanded in waves. So not every country or every location has been impacted at the same time, which has given some breathing room for these providers to take the necessary business continuity measures. Even in India, for example, locations such as Mumbai and Pune were locked down a week earlier before the entire country got locked down just yesterday. So providers had already started taking measures to shift work to other locations within India or outside of India. So the global delivery model is going to be very, very essential going into this. And I think the third point I want to add here is workforce mobility is another factor which will be looked upon very critically now. By that, what I mean is the ability for your workers to work from home or remotely, having laptops, having your data on the cloud, having all the right security and data privacy measures in place already. That's all going to become a norm because in a crisis like this, everybody realized that having a secure location really didn't help their case.
Definitely, and focus on the home worker and make sure he has the right equipment. Hey, we got another question, Anupam, that you kind of just answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What about location expansion strategies of global service providers when the pandemic settles down? Will there be more of a focus on geographic diversification?
Yeah, I think it is definitely the case. And when we talk about geographic diversification, there are several layers to it. Providers need to think not just diversifying within their countries, but across different continents. So if you're in Asia, you need to think about having a center in Eastern Europe and in Latin America and Africa. It's very, very important to have this sort of a footprint so you can shift work dynamically and mitigate the issues with service delivery.
Very good.
This is Fred. I'd like to add on that one. I totally agree with Anupam there that I think the big providers are already pretty diversified, but for a lot of the smaller ones that aren't, they are going to be forced and are going to want to for leverage capabilities to move to, global delivery and being able to work and move the workload based upon demand and based upon things like this and whatever the next one is to diverse locations and with diverse workforces.
Very good. So we're getting toward the end. I may have a question coming in right now. Before that comes in, does anybody want to make any final comments, final statements?
I mean, this is Fred. I'll make a couple of them just quick, and I'll just say, just like, we have never seen anything like this, but we've seen smaller versions of this, whether it was SARS or MERS, whether it was 9/11, whether it was some other thing in our work lives. And the tough part is the beginning, and as you readjust in the short term and change your plans, because every company and every service provider needs to be looking at what they're doing and making quick decisions on what they can do well now and what they are struggling with and how they solve those problems. And once that is over, which should be hopefully for most companies soon, you get more into this is going to be the norm and how you're going to reshape and where the dollars and efforts are going to flow in the short term until you start to come out of this and back to a new norm.
Good perspective. Anupam, you were saying?
Yeah, I'll share a couple of points, one from the client enterprise perspective, one from a service provider's. So from a client enterprise side, I think clients obviously want to ensure that their business critical functions, function as normal, and they're looking towards their service providers to give them that confidence and assurance that they will be able to at least meet some of the service levels. However, in this heightened situation, they are being flexible, and we believe clients should work collaboratively with their providers to ensure that everybody's taken care of, because everybody literally is on the same boat. On the service provider side, what we're seeing, at least in the larger ones, that right now they're still sitting on a fairly strong balance sheet. Their pipeline is still looking good. They're actually right now, because of travel bans, spending less on those buckets. So they actually need to use this period to build the level of confidence and relationship with their clients, invest in their clients' business continuity, and not focus on the margins and the bottom line, because this is the time of crisis where if they're able to come through and go the extra mile, the clients are going to remember that contribution. And once this crisis is past, those are the service providers who will be in good position to get increased business.
Excellent perspective. I've got another question for you, Anupam. What do you think will be the demand for sourcing advisors and COPs?
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. So again, as sourcing advisors, we are sort of sitting right in the middle of this. We're seeing our clients being impacted. We're also seeing service providers being impacted. So our role has really been to act as sort of the navigators through this crisis. And in some cases, and I'm not going to name those providers, we've had clients where the service providers have actually failed to deliver that particular service, and we've been asked to help come in and renegotiate that contract, and in a few cases even go through those force majeure termination cases. Now we don't expect that to happen very often, but and where possible, we are of the opinion that clients and providers need to amicably come together, avoid litigation, avoid even restructuring of contracts, but work flexibility to get through this period. So really, we feel that coming out of this crisis, the role of advisors is actually going to be more important in terms of their ability to manage the recovery cycle. In terms of COPs also, I believe COP in fact has been one of the torchbearers of this industry and has built a very disciplined, structured process in terms of sourcing and transformation. And we believe that, that's going to be a very, very important certification so that both clients and service providers can lend their best practices to come out of this recovery.
Very good. Thank you, Anupam, for all that knowledge. I appreciate it. If there's nothing else, I'm going to close this out. And I want to thank the panelists and the attendees for joining the conversation and for the excellent questions. If you have more questions that you didn't get answered, please feel free to email me, tom.dunlap@avasant.com. And you can also read the full study at avasant.com. And I just want to say, the pandemic is obviously already having a significant impact on the worldwide economy, but as we've seen, specifics vary according to the industry sector. Business leaders should evaluate this impact and what they can do to mitigate risks to their own organizations, as well as to their communities and the world at large. I hope this provides some insight into this issue, and I wish all of you and your families good health, great cheer for years to come. And now I'm going to kick it back over to Debbie.
Hi, thanks, Tom. Just want to add my thanks to Avasant. We couldn't do this without you. To all of our panelists, and of course to all of you for taking the time to join us. Please do send your questions directly to Tom. I'm sure he'll get them answered for you. And also the webinar will be available for replay shortly. Just a quick note, in our efforts to help all of our members through this time, we've created a resource page, and it's accessible from IAOP's homepage, where we're housing the calendar for upcoming webinars like these, as well as relevant information from our members. There's links to our members' web pages and some of the thought leadership pieces they have up there that could be very helpful information you can use now for members and the industry at large. So thanks again, and we'll see you again soon. Stay healthy out there.